Hello friends, today I'll be dealing with uh, one of the troubled spots in the world, right? Of course, you may ask me, sir, what about India-Afghanistan relations? I'll be covering it within the context of the larger Afghan problem because as I said, it has international ramification. India-Afghanistan relations will be part of this because without understanding the history, the demography, the ethnic composition of Afghanistan, it will not be easy for you to comprehend the problem of Afghanistan, right? See, whenever we try to understand the problems in any third world countries, I normally advise my students always try to concentrate on two or three important things. And firstly, it's demography, that is the composition of population. Secondly, it's geographical location. These are the two very important aspects in order to understand the problem of a particular country. Take for example, as I told you when I covered China. See, China can never be friendly with us because of certain historical and geographical compulsions, right? A country like Pakistan, although it is a economy with begging bowl, but why that country is so significant to all major superpowers in the world, right? It is because of its geographical location. Similarly, Sri Lankan problem you cannot understand without understanding its demographic composition. Similar is the case with Afghanistan. Afghanistan, the first thing which you should know is that it is considered as graveyard of aristocracies. Means here one empire after another, one ruling party after another kept falling like house of cards. See, first fact which you should remember is it is a landlocked country with a population of 30 million. Now, what is its demographic composition? I'll give you the exact figures later, but just now you remember that it is predominantly a Pashtun land. Predominantly in the sense, almost 45% of the population of Afghanistan are Pashtuns. Rest belonging to other tribes like Uzbek, Hazaras, there are Shias, there are Arabs, there are other ethnic groups. Some are quite significant, some are insignificant in terms of numbers, right? And for a very long time, in all such, it is basically tribal society. In all such tribal societies, there is an institution called Loya Jigra, right? There are institutions called Loya Jigra. What is this Loya Jigra and why they are significant in the entire political framework of Afghanistan? It is because there is no Indian equivalent for Loya Jigra. Why? Because at the most you can call your caste organizations, community of elders, or say Khap Panchayats, right? But they do not have any de facto powers and all that. But in tribal societies like Afghanistan, like Balochistan, Loya Jigras are very powerful institutions, right? Even mainstream political parties also depend on their support. Not only mainstream political parties, even Americans are too wary about antagonizing Loya Jigras, right? And it is they who decide the rules of the community, and those rules are strictly followed. And if non-compliance is inevitably followed by punishment. Punishment could vary from stoning to death to social boycott, right? So the thing is that this is something about Afghan society. And as I said, though it is divided into different ethnic groups, one of the most significant group is group of Pashtuns. They are called even as Pathans, right? And 1709, question is how far we can go into the history, right? I don't want to go too much into the history, otherwise one will have to start from Mahabharata. It seems Shakuni and Gandhari were from Kandhar, right? So let us not go so much into the history, it's not required also. We will take it whatever is relevant, and even this history of 100 years, I'll be, rather 200 years, I'll be running through very fast, right? 1709, we see rise of Pashtuns, which led to establishment of Hotaki dynasty in Kandahar, followed by Durrani Empire, right? And Afghanistan for a very, very long time served as a buffer state between British Indian Empire and Soviet Union. The Durand line earlier used to separate British India from Afghanistan, and after independence it separates Pakistan and Afghanistan. So as a result, in order, many a times there were rescue tribals there. In order to teach them a lesson, many a time Britishers invaded Afghanistan, and which resulted in 3 famous Anglo-Afghan wars, right? The first war, as I said, buffer state also you should remember, and this became, after 40, post Second World War, Afghanistan became one of the important centers of Cold War. I mean, from the where Cold War was spreading, right? It became important bone of contentions. It became significant both to USA as well as USSR, the 2 superpowers, to settle their superpower rivalry there. It became hotbeds of Cold War, right? Then 1839 to 1842, first Anglo-Afghan war was fought between British East India Company and forces of Dost Muhammad. Britishers won and imposed the rule of their, what should I say, their agent, that is, who was Sher Shuja. Sher Shuja rule was imposed, and later on, second Anglo-Afghan war also took place, and in this particular war, again Britishers won. Then what is significant is 1990 third Anglo-Afghan war, which led to signing of Rawalpindi Treaty. You know Rawalpindi in Pakistan, at that time it was part of British India. After this treaty, Amanullah Khan became de facto ruler of Afghanistan, and many people consider Amanullah Khan to be the father of modern Afghan nation, right? He was a very, very forward-looking man ahead of his times, in the sense he believed in modern education, he believed in liberalizing society, he wanted to do away with burqa system, he believed in promoting girls' education, right? But as I said, that was not the right time, or rather he was far ahead of his time. His such reformist measures were opposed by the community elders, the tribal leaders, the Loya Jigras, right? And finally, it came to such an extent that he had to abdicate his throne. There was so much of opposition to him, right? Although he believed in developing close links with Western countries and other things. And after that, I mean, he ruled Afghanistan right almost for a decade and literally wanted to modernize Afghanistan by developing close relations with West and all that. But that did not happen for long. Within a decade's time, he was compelled to resign. And then there were frequent coups, counter coups in the palace, like Nadir Shah, who was killed. All these coups, counter coups, killing and tribal hatred for each other continued. There was a downfall of one empire after another. And finally, stability came when Muhammad Zahir Shah took over power in Afghanistan. Credit of Zahir Shah is that he established a modern and a stable Afghanistan the very fact that he ruled from 1933 to 73 and stabilized politics in Afghanistan, right? And he wanted to bring all kinds of reforms. He developed very close Western relationship with Western countries and all that. And he wanted to preserve the independence of foreign policy of Afghanistan. So while he was on a foreign tour, a bloodless coup was committed within the palace by his own brother-in-law, Daud Khan, who declared himself to be the ruler of Afghanistan in 1973, right? And again, there was political instability in Afghanistan from 73 to 79, right? And this was the opportunity which Soviet Union also was looking for expanding its zone of influence in Afghanistan. As a result, he started supporting the local communist parties, and there were leaders like Nur Muhammad Taraki, who became president. After that, there was a power struggle within Communist Party. So Nur Muhammad Taraki, I think, was killed, assassinated. Then it was rule of Hafizullah Amin, who in turn was overthrown by Nur Muhammad. And finally, the power went into the hands of Barbak Karmal, who was again a Soviet prodigy. Please, now you have to view this entire situation from the lens of Cold War. What is Cold War? I already have done a detailed explanation. Please go through the topic. Without understanding Cold War, you won't be able to understand Afghanistan problem, right? It was basically, purpose was expansion of both these superpowers and creating their zone of influences all over the world by sucking in third world countries, right? Bringing them into their orbit of influence. And Afghanistan became a land where interests of both the superpowers directly clashed, right? Once a pro-Soviet Union regime, right from Muhammad Taraki to Barbak Karmal, was installed, Americans saw this as an opportunity to not only revive Cold War, but to deal a heavy blow to Soviet Union, right? Part of their Truman Doctrine, containment of communism. All these terms you can get a very lucid explanation in my lecture, Cold War. Once this happened, Americans thought that this is the right opportunity to take a revenge for their loss of face in Vietnam. As a result, though they directly did not intervene, but as I said, Pakistan was their close ally. Pakistan always believed in having very close relationship for their own strategic purpose of countering India, right? Because policies of many India's neighbors are India specific. So Pakistan, America, Saudi Arabia, that is Saudi money, American arms, and Pakistani intelligence and Pakistani ground support. These three combined together, and they started propagating this as a jihad, as a holy war against infidels. By infidels, they meant Communist Party of Russia and Russians. They said this is the time we must put an end to this superpower, right? End to this infidelity, end to this irreligiousness, or end to this kurf, right? As a result, they came. Of course, it's not that they had any religious purpose in mind. It's not as if they wanted to promote jihad, but by using the logic of jihad, they wanted to get the support of all the Islamic world, and to a great extent they succeeded in that, right? As a result, they started recruiting foot soldiers to fight the regime of Barbak Karmal, and they were called as Mujahideens. Mujahideen is a person who does not mind sacrificing his life for the cause of Allah, right? And they got recruit from Islamic countries all over the world, but primarily many Afghans, and launched a full-scale war on Barbak Karmal's regime. Barbak Karmal's regime was not in a position to match the firepower of Mujahideens, as a result, they requested the friendly regime of Soviet Union to intervene. And Soviet Union directly invaded Afghanistan. As I said, it went as a liberating army and stayed there as a conquering army. And this war, proxy war, continued for a very, very long time, almost from 79 to 89. And finally, as you know, Soviet Union collapsed. After this war collapsed, maybe this war was one of the contributory factors, but main reason was limitations of communist philosophy as a governance mechanism were thoroughly exposed, right? As a result, Soviet Union collapsed and they were left with no other option except withdrawing from Afghanistan. Once Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan, then Pakistan, while supporting the militant groups there, also created one deadly and dangerous militant group against these militant groups, and that was Taliban, right? Taliban, which was largely a creation of Pakistan, right? Look at the double game, and you know Pakistan has always perfected this double game of running with the hares and hunting with the hounds. On the one hand, it was brokering peace and power sharing arrangement between various sections of Mujahideens. On the other hand, it was instigating Taliban to launch a war against Mujahideens, the same Mujahideens, right? It is very quite late. Mujahideens, different forces, there were many forces. Some of the prominent ones were led by, one was led by Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, one was led by Burhanuddin Rabbani, and one was led by Abdul Rashid Dostum. These three were prominent, although there were many. And they were divided again on, as I said, they were established on ethnic lines, right? So, and Taliban largely consisted of Pashtuns, which is one of the predominant communities of Afghanistan. As a result, Pakistan brokered a peace arrangement, a peace formula, and what was that? Right? Under this, Burhanuddin Rabbani was made president, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar was made as prime minister, and Abdul Rashid Dostum was made as defense minister. And everybody thought that now, and the moment they came to power, they declared, because till then it was under communist regime, Afghanistan was considered as a secular state. The moment they came to power, they made Afghanistan as an Islamic state. And everybody thought that now there will be peace in Afghanistan. But that was not to be. Because as I said, Pakistan always wanted a government which was totally a stooge of Pakistani army, and with the help of that, they could have fomented trouble for India, which they did. Which they did in late 89s and early 90s, right? That is the why, remember, 4.5 lakhs Kashmiri Pandits were driven out from their own homeland, right? I'm not saying that local support was not there. Local support also was there. It will be totally unethical to acquit the local Muslim population there, saying that it was all the work of Pakistan. No, local people also cooperated in that, right? They are not guilt-free. They are as much guilty as those people, right? There are well enough documents to prove that. If you don't believe me, here people like Ashish Dhar or Sushil Pandit on that. Then this interim government that was formed could not continue it because Pakistan was playing double game there, right? And this government was opposed by Taliban, people like Manzoor Azhar and others, and they thought that though they have declared, and they started using Islam in everything. And what was that? they thought that though they have declared it as Islamic State, it is not based on the principles of Shariat. So we want to impose that, then only it will be truly Islamic State. And you know, these tribes, sometimes their tribal loyalties exceeds the loyalty to Islam. As a result, they have their own customs, they have their own traditions, and they follow Islam to the extent that Islam does not interfere into that. But Taliban said, no, no, it should be based on principles of Shariat. And that they were simply looking in for pretext to launch a civil war against the a semblance of stability that was provided by coalition government. Again, let me make it very clear, it's not so simple. There were many other groups. I am oversimplifying it for your understanding. So if some students happen to know certain nuances and details, don't think that I am overlooking it. Suppose if I explain that, you will get further confused. So it is enough if you know about these three different factions representing different ethnicities, right? So now the civil war started between Taliban and the ruling coalition, with Pakistan apparently supporting the ruling coalition but really supporting Taliban. And this war continued for a very long time, and by 1993 substantial area came under the control of Taliban. Initially Kandahar fell, other provinces fell, and then finally they took control of Kabul. And what happened to these three factions? They again were driven out of power. They went to their respective areas, and from there they launched a war against Taliban. And they came together, and together they were called as Northern Alliance, right? Northern Alliance. Northern Alliance. These groups of Hekmatyar, Rabbani and Abdul Rashid Dostum. Though war continued, but Taliban by that time consolidated itself with the help of Pakistan and declared Afghanistan not only an Islamic republic but based on principles of Shariat. Now I really don't know what Shariat says, but that is how the way Shariat was interpreted and implemented in Afghanistan was violated all the precepts of human rights. Like a woman was stoned to death for adultery. Whether the charges were proved or not, she was stoned to death. All barber shops were asked to close. Men were ordered to grow beard, not to be clone shaven. All girls' schools were closed. Whoever violated the orders of Taliban was killed in a most brutal fashion, and they used to say as per the principles of Shariat, right? So there was all round turmoil and misery in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, what America was doing, America simply withdrew. Why? Because for America, their purpose was served. What was their purpose? Purpose of America was to defeat Soviet Union, which they successfully did. After that, you know, Soviet Union itself got split into 16 different republics. Communism fell, right? And Soviet Union was reduced to its erstwhile part, that was Russia. So American objective was served, and America has always followed the policy of use and throw. As a result, they withdrew from the scene, and from the distance they were talking about better power sharing arrangements. They were saying in UN, and UN also wanted to broker peace between Taliban and Northern Alliance, but whatever arrangement was worked out failed. And Taliban created one of the most fundamentalistic and obscurantist state of Afghanistan by applying the principles of Shariat in a most brutalized manner. Again, I don't want to go into the issues whether Shariat permitted it or not. My concern is how they actually implemented Shariat, right? And they did it in a most brutal fashion. There are international reports to substantiate it. There are too many articles, too many evidence for that. So the thing is that while this fighting was continued, what Taliban publicly announced that they are going to destroy some 1,000 or 1,500 old statues of Buddha statue in Afghanistan in the provinces called Bamiyan statue near Bamiyan, right? And they said Islam is against Buddha Parasti, means against idols. As a result, we are going to destroy. Now, many Buddhist countries, including Japan, Thailand, and world opinion, they requested Taliban not to destroy it. They even said, we will be giving you money for that and other things. But Taliban was hardly guided by these considerations. As a result, they publicly demolished those statues. And as a result, UN requested Taliban, Taliban did not listen. And as a result, UN imposed sanctions on Afghanistan, right? Thinking that Taliban will fall in line, but that was not to be the case. In fact, Taliban went to the extent of bombing UN local office in Kandahar, right? And the world opinion turned against Taliban, despite the fact that Pakistan was lending them all kinds of support to Taliban to foment trouble in India, especially in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, as a result, one more organization joined hands with Taliban, and which was headed by a man called Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden, right? Now, he formed his own organization called Al-Qaeda, and he strictly believed in the concept of pan-Islamism. Now, what is pan-Islamism? Pan-Islamism is an idea that Muslims all over the world are one, and this world belongs to Muslims. Other races should be either subservient or converted into Islam, or should have the status of a dhimmi. Dhimmi means a low status by paying jizya tax to them. And this world should be ruled by all over the world by Muslims, by Islam. And they considered that in their path, this was the worldview of Osama bin Laden. Three enemies. Who are these three enemies? India, America, and Israel. Primarily Hindus, Christians, and Jews. So the first places to be destroyed should be these three. And from there, he started, trying to foment trouble for America. And in 1993, as you are aware, there was a bombing in state of Oklahoma, right? And America responded in kind by sending missiles and bombarded some of the caves where this man was supposed to be hiding, but he escaped, right? And while things continued, UN was trying to intervene, many countries tried to broker formula, but all these were rejected by Taliban, right? And because it was not in the interest of Pakistan, and which kept instigating Taliban to refuse all these kinds of, and it's not that they will completely puppet on the nationalist issue. They even were opposed to Pakistan. I'll give you the example of it towards the end of my class. But by and large, they were guided by Pakistan. While all these things were continuing, Osama bin Laden, with his Al-Qaeda and his money power, tried to bomb American bases in places like Yemen, Gulf of Aden, and with the help of Gaddafi, he even bombarded some of the centers of America in Tripoli and other places. As a result, America became enemy of Osama bin Laden. For Osama bin Laden, all non-Muslims anyway were enemies, right? So as a result, all this culminated in, as you know, the famous event. What was that? 11th September 2001. What was this? 3 pilots belonging to Al-Qaeda, right, who took a pilot license there, aviation license there, and flew 2 planes of United Airlines and one of American Airlines flew, and two of them went and crash landed into World Trade Center, which was symbol of America's economic mind. And one plane crash landed into Pentagon, which happens to be the symbol of America's defense might. Right? So now you cannot attack a country like America and think that nothing will happen to you. And there was all round panic in America. It was seen to be believed. In fact, I got struck in that panic, right? And I was first-hand witness to what happened in America at that time, right? As a result, there was all-round panic. For the first time, a country like America was attacked like that, right? Otherwise, everybody used to think that America means impregnable defense. No country can dare even to cast an eye on America, right? So for the first time, vulnerabilities of America came to surface, right? Vis-a-vis the Islamic fundamentalism. So as a result, America gave time to Afghan ruler, I think it was Mullah Omar, right, to hand over Osama bin Laden. They said, we do not consider Taliban to our enemy, but Osama bin Laden is certainly an enemy of America. You either hand over, because till then Americans knew that these are terrorists and other things. In fact, they were created by America against Soviet Union, but they were not much perturbed about these terrorists because they were not sufferers of it, right? So whenever India used to bring this matter, they used to say, where is the evidence? Where is the evidence? You are exaggerating and all that. They used to say peaceful solution, peaceful solutions. But after that, they still gave that leverage to Taliban and requested them to hand over Osama bin Laden, right? They said our enemy is Al-Qaeda, not Taliban. But you know the events from then, that Mullah Omar completely refused, because by the time they became very friendly, some say that they became even relatives of each other by marrying daughters of each other. I don't know to what extent it is true, but that is what we hear. But fact is that they became very close to each other. The very fact that Mullah Omar risked attack on Afghanistan rather than handing over Osama bin Laden. That goes to show the kind of relationship they had. As a result, and both believed in pan-Islamism and all that. As a result, both became quite friendly. Then after exhausting all the options, warning and all that, America invaded Afghanistan, and in 2002, roughly 2001, and dismantled the terror network of Taliban, right? After that, what happened? After that, it took a lot of time for America to establish an interim government there. And that happened in the year 2004, when America felt that they have sufficiently weakened Taliban. As a result, 2004, they established a coalition government headed by Hamid Karzai. I mean, till elections, it was an interim arrangement, but Hamid Karzai, for many reasons, one of the ideal candidates for that time, because he knew how to carry various ethnic groups along with him, despite the fact that he was a Pashtun, right? So as a result, in the year 2005, elections were held, and Hamid Karzai became the most popular candidate for that, and finally he won that elections and became the de facto, the official and the first elected president of Afghanistan. And one more thing, let me tell you about Afghanistan, especially in the context of our country, Hamid Karzai, is that Hamid Karzai has a lot of soft corner for India. He had his education in Shimla. He speaks Hindi very fluently, and the first country which he visited after taking oath as president of Afghanistan was India, and signed a series of agreements with India, and India started the rebuilding with the help of India promised lot of aid, lot of other kinds of help to Hamid Karzai, and started playing a huge role in rebuilding Afghan economy and Afghanistan as a country. It is India which built Salma Dam there. It is India which has built the parliament building there. It is India which is providing health care and medical facilities there. It is India which is supplying them with many helicopters. India which is giving training to their security agencies. So India is building roads there. India is providing all kinds of facilities in Afghanistan. Now question arises, why India is doing all this? Is it for the sake of charity? Let me tell you, there is nothing like charity in international relations. Every country tries to weigh pros and cons and does cost-benefit analysis. Why Afghanistan is significant to India? Afghanistan is significant to India for the simple reason that it is important because Afghanistan is a rich country in terms of resources and minerals. Secondly, India wants to neutralize the growing influence of Pakistan and China in Afghanistan. And thirdly, there is a possibility of emergence of ISIS there, which could be detrimental to the security of interest of India in future. So India want to contain there. And most important, India wants access to Central Asian republics, right? And India can get it through Afghanistan, although India does not have any direct route to Afghanistan. That is the reason why we are helping Iran. It is we who built Chabahar port in Iran, right? And India got the contract to manage that port, and through Chabahar we can get trade routes from Afghanistan to Central Asian republics like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, which are resource rich and mineral rich, and we can get trade access even up to Russia. Otherwise, you just look at it, India will have to go cross all this and trade with Russia through Nordic region, right? So Chabahar port is quite significantly important for India, and Afghanistan provides that access to India for Central Asian republics. Now to conclude this point, there are 4 reasons. One, it is rich in resources and minerals in Afghanistan right now. See, problem is that you just have a look at their demographic composition of Afghanistan. 42% Pashtuns, 27% Tajiks, 9% Uzbeks, 9% Hazras, Ajmaks, Turkomans, Baluchis, and others. There are different tribes. Now, none of these tribes see eye to eye with each other, right? Hamid Karzai was one of the exceptional leaders who had the ability of carrying along all these all different factions. But his ability was yet to be tested in elections after 2005, because by that time there was sufficient schisms among these different groups, because these groups do not tolerate the domination of Pashtuns, right? And there are many external dimensions in Afghan problem, because you may ask, sir, why the Afghan problem has not been solved, despite the fact that democracy being extended to Afghanistan. See, problem is that firstly, at the national level, there are too many factions, too many ethnic groups. Then there are too many foreign players, including India, whose interests are at the cross purposes. Now, what exactly are these interests? What exactly are and how they are working at cross purposes, we will see. As to recollect what I have said about Indian role, as I said, India is playing a significant role in rebuilding the economy of Afghanistan. India is providing all kinds of help to Afghanistan. India has built Salma Dam there. India has built the parliament building there. India is trying to build the police academy there. India is building many infrastructure projects there, right? And plus India is supplying them with many helicopters and others for surveillance purposes and all that, right? Now, as I said, what are the Indian interests? Indian interests are primarily four. First, the India wants access to the mineral sources of Afghanistan. Two, it wants to counterbalance or neutralize the growing influence of Pakistan and China. Third, there is a possibility of emergence of ISIS, Islamic State, which could be detrimental to the security of India in future. India wants to neutralize that. And then India wants to get access to Central Asia through Afghanistan, through Chabahar port for its energy security. These are the four primary interests of India. There could be other minor interests also, but you concentrate on these four. Now, what is the problem today exactly? You have a look at this demographic composition. Then India committed a need of $2 billion to Afghanistan, right? And as long as I said, there are 5 or 6 major players, external major players in Afghanistan. And what are these? These are the flagship schemes which I have told you. Cheetal helicopters have been given to them by India of many powers. These are the Indian interest, as I said. Look at the point 50, right? Now, question arises, what are the 6 or 7 different players in Afghanistan? See, today's situation is such that even army is divided into ethnic and ethnic lines. The rule of people like Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah, power sharing arrangement also could not work out in Afghanistan. Now the situation is that Taliban is gaining ground in Afghanistan, right? Now there are 6 external players. One important player is Iran. Iran will intervene only when the interest of Shias, because Iran considers itself to be the protectors of Shias all over the world. So Iran is bothered, will interfere only to the extent that Shia interests are affected in Afghanistan. Now, another important player is India. Let me start with our own country. What India wants? India wants a president like Hamid Karzai, so that who is quite favorably disposed towards India, and not only that, India with the help of people, I mean not necessarily Hamid Karzai, a leader like that, right? So that India can continue to do the kind of work which they are doing, increase its influence, have developed their leverage in Afghanistan, right? Access to mineral wealth, containing growing Chinese and Pakistani influence, and most important, getting access to Central Asian republics for the energy security. For this, India wants to keep Taliban out of power, because without that, these Indian interests will not be served. That's the perception of Indian foreign policy, right? But my feeling is that this particular kind of objective are not sustainable, for the simple reason that the larger segment of Pashtuns it will not be acceptable to them, and they in turn are instigated by Pakistan. I mean, it is like saying that I want to rule over the country by not giving any post to any Hindi-speaking person, right? It is impossible to rule over India. It is impossible to rule over Telangana by saying that I want to be chief minister, but I will not give representation to any Telugu speaking person. It is something like that. India's expectations is something like this. So I feel it is not sustainable in the long run. Placing people like Hamid Karzai will not be sustainable. It cannot be. It's not a very sustainable option. As a result, second best option for India is that, okay, the present regime, the present arrangement of Abdullah or Ashraf Ghani, such arrangement also can continue, whereby they can be friendly with Pakistan, they can be friendly, at least they will not be detrimental to the interest of India, right? And India should continue to have the kind of leverage which it is having. But somehow keep Taliban out of power. As I said, this is not a sustainable option in the long run. Now, another important player is Pakistan. What Pakistan wants? Pakistan wants to neutralize India, hence support Pashtuns, right? And install a Pashtun government which will be not just favorable but a puppet regime for Pakistan, so that they can formalize their border of Durand line with Afghanistan, right? Well, and keep India out. So, and use the foot soldiers of the newly formed government for fomenting trouble in India. This again is an option which is unlikely to work in the long run. Why? Because a purely Pashtun rule is not acceptable to other minorities and ethnic groups. Number one. Two, there is no guarantee that once Taliban comes to power, they will be puppet regime of Pakistan. A fact, I'll slightly take you into the history. When Pakistani delegate who thought that these are our chelas, these are our stooges, they will simply sign on dotted lines. So Pakistani delegate went and to Mullah Amar and asked him to sign on a line, on dotted lines, formalizing the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan as Durand line should be, right? And please understand, Pashtuns neither historically nor today have accepted Durand line, right? So even when he was considered to be a stooge, he threw that paper on the face of Pakistani delegate. Such is their emotional attachment, such is their emotional feeling against Durand line. So Pashtuns, frankly speaking, they may be supported by Pakistan, but Durand line is not acceptable to them. And how it is going to impose huge cost on Pakistan, I'll tell you at the end of the lecture. Then there is China. What are the interests of China? China does not want any access to Central Asia because already they share border with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and all those countries, right? What China wants? China wants access to the natural resources of Afghanistan, number one. China also wants to play a significant role, right? Increase its leverage within Afghanistan. Thirdly, China wants to contain India or marginalize India in Afghanistan. But as a result, when it comes to supporting Taliban, China quite paradoxically is on the same page as India, because they are afraid that if Taliban becomes too powerful, they may export Islam into Xinjiang province and foment trouble for China in future. So though it is anti-India, but here it is like China is slightly cautious. Now Russia, what does Russia want? Russia wants to, it's not allergic to Afghanistan. It wants it is okay with any kind of government as long as they get access to the mineral resources of Afghanistan plus market to their products, right? So Russia is okay with any of these arrangements. Now what does America, another important player, wants? America simply wants to withdraw, because American public opinion is quite sensitive to loss of human life, and many American soldiers have lost their lives since 2002. As a result, America wants to withdraw, but they are looking for some sort of a face saving. And what is that face saving? That is the reason why they are entering into a secret pact with Taliban. They are not allergic to Taliban now. That's the reason why they want to bring a distinction between good and bad Taliban. In the sense, face saving is that, okay, because people will ask, so since almost 2 decades you are in Afghanistan and finally you have done deal with Taliban. So they are deliberately bringing this for very tactical reasons, distinction that good bad Taliban. For me, good and bad Taliban are like a boiling ice cream, right? So as a result, their objective is to simply withdraw with a face saving. But problem with that is that once again Taliban will come to power and there will be again Afghanistan will enter into a turmoil, because rule of Taliban will not be acceptable to Hazaras, Uzbeks and other ethnic groups. And please remember, demographic of composition of Afghanistan is such that so-called minorities are majorities in their regions, right? So what do you think could be the solution of Afghanistan? Suppose if this question is asked to you in interview, what do you think would be the solution for Afghan problem? As I said, today the situation is that even army is divided into ethnic lines. As a result, the only solution which I can think of is partition of Afghanistan into 2. Suppose if this is Afghanistan, this region is full of Pashtuns, and this region is full of minorities, whereby respective minorities are majorities in this region. Because time has come when we should be practical. I know it is unethical to partition a country, divide a country, but it is infinitely a better option than creating a failed state, because failed states are the biggest dangers to the world peace. And Afghanistan, by all parameters, is a failed state, right? As a result, I'm not saying there will not be any consequences to what I'm saying. There will be. Like, once you divide it, right, into Pashtuns and non-Pashtuns, let this area be called as Afghanistan, and this area will be called as Pakhtunistan, which has been a long-standing demand of Pathans or Pashtuns. Now at least 50% of the problem is solved, because the respective minorities will be majorities in these areas with maximum devolution or decentralization of powers. Now what will happen here? This will be called as Pakhtunistan. Now problem with such an arrangement is that Pashtuns are not going to be satisfied with the small lump of Pakhtunistan. And you know, they do not recognize Durand line, that is border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, because this side of the border also you have Pashtuns. Today or tomorrow, they are going to demand a larger Pakhtunistan, which will include not only this region of Afghanistan, but this entire Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region of Pakistan. And let me tell you, it's not that I am forecasting, this is going to be a reality today or tomorrow, right? So as a result, if we explore this option, there will be peace in this region, there will be peace in this region. As I said, failed states are great threat to the world peace, right? So dividing Afghanistan perhaps is the only workable solution. Now consequences of this will be, they will be demanding it. There will be bad consequences of Pakistan. Let them face it. Let them face it. I mean, they should get the taste of their own medicines. Anyway, let me tell you, within a decade or two, Pakistan is going to get broken into 4 or 5 pieces, right? What you call as Pakistan will be only Punjab. Baluchistan will go out. Sindh will become a separate province, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa will either remain a separate province or will become, once we divide Afghanistan, will become part of larger Pakhtunistan, and that I think is only the solution for lasting peace. But how events are going to, how process is going to unfold itself in terms of events is to be seen, and how events are going to unfold in future, it is in the realm of future. But this perhaps is the only solution for Afghanistan problem. Now, what were the possible questions? Question could be about Afghan problem in general, for which you have to concise whatever I have said, or question could be India's stake in Afghanistan. India's stakes are simply four, primarily four, there can be other, you read it, but primarily four you should mention. First, access to mineral resources of Afghanistan. Second, containing growing influence of China and Pakistan. Third, containing the possible emergence of ISIS in Afghanistan. And fourth, getting access to Central Asian Republic for the energy security of India. If you can present these 4 points, I think that's more than enough for your 150 marks answer or even 250 marks answer, right? So with this, I conclude. Thanks.